We are continuing on our journey through Hilchot Shabbat, Siman Shin Yutet, Hilchot Borer, and we're on the 7th Shiur, on page 50 of the regular pamphlets that you have, starting Sif Tet and hoping to be able to finish Sif Tet and Sif Yud, which is a very important Saif. Today we're going to discuss Bli Neder, lots of things that are on people's minds. Usually when you mention the word borer, and people right away think about tea bags and tea kettles and sifting juices and taking stuff out of your tea or coffee with your finger when you're drinking and you notice something floating around, and the things of the nature that we use sifters usually. You want to have a strainer and wash your grapes or fruits, hanging the strainer over the faucet. Or, for those who are very careful, especially in California with the water, which is not as clean as other states maybe, and you want to have a sifter to sift all the water that you have. You have one of those drinking water faucets next to your sink in your house or in shul, and you want to know if on Shabbat you could do it. It's a triple sifter or 5 sifters, depending on how fancy it is. Is it mutar to use those things on Shabbat? This is the questions that many people have in mind. So this really starts with the Mishnah. In Masechet Shabbat, Kuf Lamed Zayin, Amud Bet, there the Chachamim say it's asur to put shmarim of wine settlements in a strainer. You take the shmarim, you pour it on Shabbat on a strainer, you go to a very, very warm place. Afterwards, it's isur deoraita, it will be chayav hatat, right? Now, at the same time, it's not really clear if it's borer or meraket. It's a whole sugya there in the Gemara, beyond the scope of this little talk over here. But 2 dapim later, in Kuf Lamed Tet, the Gemara, the Mishnah there, excuse me, on Kuf Lamed Tet Amud Bet says that you could pour water on shmarim, and wine settlements that are sitting in a strainer. You could pour water on them, and of course you get the outcome would be some red water tasting like a little bit of wine, and that's mutar. And the question is, how in the world is that mutar? You're doing the same thing. You're straining the wine. Now, you're not getting wine out. You're getting diluted wine juice. But how in the world is that mutar? And it's machloket rishonim. On one hand, Rashi writes that you're doing this actually. This what we explain is based on Rashi's paskin and Shulchan Aruch, that you have the wine sediment sitting in a strainer and you're pouring clear water on it. That's what Rashi says. Meiri writes that we're talking not in a strainer, but you're talking about when you have a barrel of wine and you have the bottom of it left with the wine sediments, and you're pouring water on it to kind of like get more wine out of the shmarim, and the wine would be now sitting on top. The watered down, literally, wine would be on top, and the sediments would sit, and now you have more to pour or more to scoop out. And that's how the Meiri understands this Mishnah. But now the question is, how exactly is the heter? Now, Maran writes, and we'll go through this piece by piece. Maran Aruch writes in the beginning that it is asur, and I'll read the words of Maran. Meshameret afiru turya me'erev Shabbat. If you have a strainer, a sifter that has been set up already from before Shabbat, even asur liten ba shemarim. It's asur to put in it the wine settlements in order to get the wine sifted through the strainer. But says Maran, avalim natan bashmarim erev Shabbat. But if you already from Friday put the sediments in and you sifted the wine, now you want to pour some water to just finish the job. Mutar liten alehem mayim kedesh yachzru selulim lazuv. This way you could make more drip down, and that would somehow be mutar. That's the Shulchan Aruch. Now, why exactly that is? So first of all, you see that Maran Paskins like Rashi. Now it makes it very strange. Why is the Mishnah in Kuf Lamed Zayin a Yisur Doraita, and the Mishnah in Kuf Lamed Tet is completely mutar? Now the Mishnah Berurah says, I'm going to read this together in Sif Katan Lamed Gimel. רוצה לומר שהשמרים סלולים והמים יעזובו מהם עם מקצת מן היין שנשאר בלוע בו, that the shmarim, the sediments are going to stay up there, and the water is going to go through them, sifting whatever wine is soaked inside the sediments, and drain them down into the cup, into your container. And the reason that this is mutar, says the Chafetz Chaim, v'atam shem b'nitzinat mayim mishum borer, the reason is, you ready? Shamayim shehu noten selulim hem, because the water that you're putting in is clear water. Whereas the first case is you're pouring wine with the shmarim. That's exactly what you don't want, and that's considered sifting, and that's Isur Doraita. But here you're putting water. What you're pouring in is clear. You could drink it like that. There's nothing in this that you don't want.
It's not a mixture.
Forget about it, it's not a mixture. It's nothing there that you don't want. It's completely pure. Right. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ve'en bahem davar shetzarich livror. There's nothing there that you want out. It's pure water. So says the Mishnah Berurah, and hence, mutar liten b'shabbat mayim al gabe shmarim shenish'aru bechavit. He brings the other understanding as well, that you could put water on inside a barrel of wine, in order to soak up the shmarim, and now you'll have more watered down wine inside the barrel, and you scoop it out as well. That is like the Meiri says, as we mentioned before, right? Now,
so why would you do that though? I mean,
what's the question?
What are you accomplishing, like pouring clear water on him?
In which case, Meiri or Rashi?
No, in the Mishnah Berurah that we were just talking about.
It's two cases, Mishnah Berurah brought.
So the case of the end of Tet.
The one that you put in the chavit?
Yeah.
In the chavit? Well, because you can't drink the sediments, but you could drink a good tasting wine tasting water that you pour in. So imagine if you have 10 ounces of sediments and you put another 50 ounces of pure water inside, and it stays there for a bunch of hours, then you have some 50 ounces or more of clear juice that you could, it's now sitting on top and the sediments on the bottom. You could ladle out some watered down wine, which you didn't have before, because beforehand you could not ladle anything without all the sediments inside.
So it's like making tea essence kind of? It's like you're getting a tam? You're getting...
Yeah, you're getting tam inside of it, yeah.
Even though it's clear. So, I mean, it can't be perfectly clear if it's observing a tam.
It depends how much you wait for the sediments to settle down. Yeah,
in order to be mutter, it has to be completely clear?
Not necessarily. We'll get to that in just a moment. So, now, by the way, usually the Ben Ish Chai says over here in Parashat Beshalach that even though the Mesanenit is really good from bad, but because the Meshameret is like it's like the keli that was used for brera in the time of the Mishnah. It's like your regular nafa and kvara. Therefore, it's separating good from bad with a kli, which would be Isur D'Oraitis. That still is a serious offense. The beginning of Seif Tet over here, but Or Letzion writes that if you want, let's say, regular mint leaves that you have, which are usually considered infested by small creatures, they usually have thrips, baby thrips on them, but you want some taste of na'na, of mint in your tea. So what you could do is you could just sift water on a sifter. You have your mint that you're putting clear water or tea, whatever it is, on it, and that would be fine, because what the tea or the water that you're pouring on with a sifter there, it's clear. You don't want any of that to be sifted. You just want them to take some of the taste of na'na with them out. So that's mutar, right? There's no problem with that. You could either wrap the mint leaves in a mesh, and kind of like, has to be small mesh, like very fine, because the bugs are also tiny. You could get out if it's and you dip it in, or you could just pour on top of it, and that's totally fine. Now you could put it there and put the mint inside and drink the water with a sifter on top, as we had before in Shulchan Aruch, or you could just do like a tea bag, so to speak, and do it. Rav Moshe Levi Alav Shalom in Chelik Bet Perek Zayin of Menuchat Ahava, he says, for the same reason, you could put your grapes, your fruits, in a strainer, hanging over your sink, and pour just clear water from the faucet on top of it, and that's completely fine also, because the water that you're putting in does not need any sifting. It's clear water. You just want to wash off, the things that are in the fruits, and that would be fine as well. You just don't want the fruits to fall down. It's instead of you holding it, you're holding it with a sifter, but you're not sifting any water that's going down, and everything is going down to the drain, and therefore that also is mutar, right? So that's 2 or 3 of the questions that we discussed already. You could put the mint leaves inside. You could strain, use a strainer, even though that's a kli that's made for sifting. You could use that for your grapes and so on and so forth to wash them off. But you can't necessarily use a strainer for having like a macaroni that you have with water, and you want to just strain the water out on Shabbat, right? Or for those who have macaroni on Shabbat, right? So, can you do that? The answer is no, you cannot. Why you cannot, we'll get to in just a few moments. So that is the Mishnah Berurah over here, as far as Seif Tet is concerned, and that's basically what we wanted to discuss in Seif Tet. Now, Seif Yud, which is the main Seif we're going to focus on today, is also on Daf Kuf Lamed Tet Amud Bet, on a Mishnah that talks about filtering wine through different garments or baskets, and the Rishonim debate exactly how to learn the Mishnah, and interestingly, Shulchan Aruch brings the machloket, this Rambam versus other Rishonim, and we're going to just focus on the Mishnah and the Braita brought in the Gemara, and then mention the machloket Rishonim as well. Now, they are, if you take a look at your pamphlets on page 51, and if anyone doesn't have it, there's some extra ones here that you could get. So it says the says over here, there are a few points that you need to pay attention in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says it is mutar to strain wine, filter wine, through garments and Egyptian baskets, right? That means you have wine, and you are literally filtering it on Shabbat through garments, right? How is that exactly mutar? How is that not borer? That's the obvious question you have immediately when you take a look at the Mishnah, right? Now, first of all, it says wine but not water. It seems like water would be asur to strain through garments. Secondly, you see that's garments, not a strainer, not an actual sifter for wine. And thirdly, there's no mention of how clear this wine is. Is this sediment? Is this, well, it can't really be sediment because that's the Mishnah that we just said. So it's wine. Why are you sifting it then? If there's wine, how dirty? No, dirty is like how diluted or clear or not clear is this wine that you could sift through this. So Zeiri says in the Gemara says in the name of Zeiri that a person could have clear wine that you want to sift, and you could have clear water also that you want to sift through a real sifter. Not garments, but through a real professional strainer. That's what the Zeiri says. So now, it became just worse. First of all, Zeiri added water, which was not mutter in a garment. A garment is not professional. You just take your undershirt and you put it there and you sift something through it. Versus if a professional strainer, so over there by the garment, water was asur. And we said, bedavka, a strainer, a garment is mutar for wine, which would indicate very strongly that a strainer would be asur because a kli hamiyuchad for bereira. And yet, Zeiri says, strainer mutar. So how do you exactly put these together, right? So the Rashba and the Ran, and this is a school of thought of other Rishonim as well. The two are brought here, but there's a number of other Rishonim who adapt this understanding of the Zeiri, or the Gemara in general, to understand the 3 points of contention between apparent 3 points of contention between Zeiri and the Mishnah. They understand it like this, and this is what Maran Bet Yosef brings from Ran and the Rashba as well, that if you have clear wine, the most people would drink it without straining it. It's like, oh, it's okay wine. Now you may have a little bit of a little straw mixed with it from the field when it was processed, or a little something, but it's like a wine that 90% of people would just drink it no problem, right? So that you could filter it through a strainer to make it more fine-tuned and clear, because that is not straining. Even though that you're using a strainer, this is something that everybody basically drinks, and hence you could make it more clear, since that process of clarification, extra fine-tuning is not borer, since you yourself would be drinking it without that, right?
So what would you call it? What would that action be called if it's not called straining?
Refinement for the English-speaking individuals, right? So, well, yeah, you're refining it. That's what you're doing. It's not borer. It's not like, you don't really care. You don't really care. And therefore, it will be mutar. Most people would drink this, right? Most people would drink this, and therefore, it's not considered a melacha. We had this by Shin Yud Chet also, for those who remember, right? And then when it's something that most people, it's done already. So even though that you're enhancing it a little bit more, it's not considered a melacha.
I just want to confirm, Rabbi, the standard for what's acceptable is what most people would do, not your intention, right? I feel like we keep mentioning both, your intention versus the derech of the olam.
We'll get to the finicky people in 2 pages. He actually has a piece on finicky people, right?
Not just finicky people, like, is it your intention that matters, or the olam, of what most people will consider, right? So,
But again, if it's something that you would not do at all, right? Even though that most people do, it could run into problems. But here, you also would drink it if you didn't have this. Well, you would not drink it. Of course, you would. You would.
it depends what.
But you want it better, so you want to refine it a little bit more. That's fine.
If I wouldn't have drank this, meaning if I'm so, you're gonna get to it, I guess.
Yeah. So just give it some moment to develop. So that's clear wine. You want to make it just refined. But if you have a semi-clear wine that has, the minority of people would drink without first straining it, but the majority of people would not. This is already too uncomfortable, right? If that type of a wine you have, then you cannot use a strainer, a kli that's miyuchad lekach. You could use it through a garment. Through a garment you could do. Strainer you cannot do. And a wine that nobody would drink because it has just too much things in it, mixture in it, then you cannot do it at all on Shabbat. Doesn't matter what you're using. Same would be like, with pulps. I'm not sure if you'll get to a point that the pulp would be so much that nobody would drink it. But it would be very similar to that as well. I think it's more relevant nowadays with the orange juice, that they have like 3 at least different levels. There's no pulp, there's some pulp, there's a lot of pulp. And some people, a lot of pulp for them is really not possible to drink. They just want to sift it, right? So that really would get into this question over here. So this is the first and the more popular way of dealing with Ze'iri being put together in the Mishnah, that Ze'iri just explains more in the Mishnah. When the Mishnah tells you, with the garments talking about a semi-clear one, and when Ze'iri says you can use a strainer, it's talking about the mamash, a clear, nice, good wine, that you want to make it just a little bit more refined.
So clear is the color, or clear is...
No. Clear means it's nothing mixed with it. So you may have a little bit of a straw, a little piece, whatever, that nobody really cares. But you want to have it refined because you have Mashiach coming to your home, right? I love your name, yeah.
I'll drink whatever.
Yeah, so you want to respect them really well, and you pour it in, so that would actually be allowed even through a strainer, right? Oh, with that said, of course, if you're doing water, would be the same thing. If the tap water is drinkable, there's nothing wrong with it really, but you want to purify it. Most people drink it, right? Most people will drink it. Now you want to have it a little bit more purified, a little bit better. Fine, there's no problem with sifting it through on Shabbat. Whereas if you have a water that most people don't drink it, well, so then you cannot do a professional sifter, but you could do maybe through a garment, according to this Ran and the Rashba, right? Now, why wasn't the sifter versus garment mentioned? The garment was not mentioned by water for a very simple but zaitik side reason, and that is, well, we have to keep Shabbat not just in Hilchot Borer, but we also have to keep Shabbat in Hilchot Kibus and Melabin. Now, if you have a garment and you pour clear water on it, that is a isur of Melabin on Shabbat. You cannot do that. Now you understand why by garment wine was mentioned, but not water. But by sifter, there's no difference. Why? Because sifter, you don't care about the cleanliness of the sifter. It's a sifter. And sifter does not have to be a professional sifter. If you make your old undershirt now a mesanenet, a sifter, right? You're no longer going to wear this. You're going to use it as a sifter. Even a garment becomes mutar. Anything that people don't at all care about its cleanliness, if you put water on it, it's not considered that you're melaben because you don't care. You just want to sift the water. So if you have such a thing as your strainer, sifter, with a garment that's not the professional, then water also would be mutar to pour through it, given the requirements that we spoke about, that most people would drink it. Right? So hence you have the water filters also covered over here, so that if you want to use one of those like fancy waters that we just actually installed over here, it has 5 different levels of fine-tuning the water. Mutar, there's no problem, because the tap water is drinkable for most people, right? And those who don't drink it, they don't drink it because of, there are 2 main reasons for those water gurus. Really is the content of chlorine inside, which is almost like an equivalent of a pool water, the tap water over here. So chlorine is not supposed to be good for a body, and that does not get fixed by the filters either, right? Unless you have one of these fancy things that takes the chlorine out. So that's one of the reasons that people have bottled water. And then there's the lead and other things that some of it you could take out. But again, I think the majority of people still will be okay with tap water. If they didn't have regular water available to them, it would be completely fine for them. And they would drink it, and hence, that would be mutar.
Just here in California,
Yeah.
like in other states, not necessarily.
Other states would be even better sometimes. California is one of the worst ones. It's like the number 8 or something.
Except for New York has like bugs, no?
Well, New York is, again, the bugs we spoke about already before, refer to the other shiur, whether, also depending on what you hold about the bugs. In other words, when you go through the sugya of tolaim, some tolaim are mutar, some tolaim of water are mutar. If you hold the bugs in New York water are considered those that are mutar, and most people are not disgusted drinking the tap water, because you're not thinking about the godzilas inside when you drink them, so then it will be also mutar. If you hold that they are asur, then of course it will be a different story.
Oh wait, if he was koshesh for kibus with water on a garment, he's not koshesh for tzivia on wine on a garment? If you're going to pour red wine on a garment, you're going to color it. You're
going to make it very ugly. It's not necessarily, depending on also what color it is. We're not discussing the halachot of paint, dyeing right now, but yeah, depending on what it is. If it's white garment and you put wine on it, it just makes it disgusting. Right? It makes it ugly. It's not necessarily a good thing.
Uh-huh.
That becomes a question, believe it or not, when you have wine spills every Shabbat, and you want to use a napkin to clean it. What's mutar, what's not mutar, especially if you're using a towel. So that's a different sugya, not borer.
But so it's not a problem of dyeing.
It's saying over here that's not, right? So that's the Rashba and the Ran and other Rishonim. Rambam, on the other hand, which we're going to discuss it because it is brought in Shcharuch, Rambam holds that everything is a notch more stringent, and he says strainers are always asur. You can never use a strainer, a professional strainer on Shabbat, even if you have clear water, clear wine. I don't care. It still is going to be asur. His understanding of the Gemara in Zeiri is very difficult because Zeiri says you can use a strainer. So how do you put the Rambam together in the Gemara? And again, Maram Bet Yosef has an understanding of it that that Zeiri never meant strainer. When he said meshameret, he means to strain, not to use a strainer. So that becomes part of the question, of course, that has does not like Maran's explaining of the Rambam's Shita, and Taz just says it depends how clear is clear. In other words, Taz says, even according to Rambam, if you have a super duper clear wine, you can use a strainer. Right? So Rambam is more machmir than regular, but if you have a sifted one, mamash, and you have a little more refinement, then, so he just pushes it a little bit upper, but it's the same thing really as we had before. Right? So that is the basic understanding. Now let's go a little bit through the actual Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says if you have clear wine, let's read through Seif Yud, Yain or Mayim Shem Salulim. You have water or wine that are salul, are clear. Mutar l'sanan b'mshameret. You could strain them with a strainer, mamash using a meshameret, right? V'afal pi sheyesh bo ksamim dakin, says the Ramah, even though that he may have some little straw, some little something, and that now you're making it refined, still it will be mutar to use it, no problems, right? That's what the Ramah writes. Once it is drinkable without sifting it, it still is mutar. Aval besudar, but if you're using a sudar, a garment, a little piece of cloth, then, and it's a cloth that's not miyuchad for straining, then it's asur to do water because of kvisa, because you're washing it, right? Mishum libun, v'yayin mishar mashkin mutar, but other colored drinks is mutar, liquids is mutar. V'yimehem akurim, but if they're not as clear, ben mayim ben yaim asur lesanenam, then it will become asur to use a mesanenet, to use a strainer to sift through them, right? So it brings the Rambam afterwards that meshameret is always asur, even with yain and mayim that are salul. That's of course following the Maram Bet Yosef's understanding in Bet Yosef of the Shita of the Rambam. And then he says that even with a sudar, even with a garment, you can't do it if it's really, really not filtered and nobody would drink it, right? So that's the Shulchan Aruch. Now, before we get to a lot of details here in the minutes that we have left, we're going to discuss the basic core element of this, which is discussed by the Sachich of Rav, Rabbi Avram Sachich of the Sachich of Rebbe, that's known as his Sefer Avnei Nezer, his Sefer Hilchot Shabbat, Iglei Tal. The Iglei Tal explains this, that when you have one entity, right, you could filter through it. In other words, we said that when most people drink something as is, you could filter through it with a strainer, which is usually used for borer. So what you want to make it more refined, and you want to separate those that garbage out of it. So why is that mutar at the end of the day? What's the logic behind it? Says the Iglei Tal, the fact that you are taking the psolet out of the ochel, even though that most people would have the psolet, by the end of the day you're sifting something, which is I think what bothered you before, right? So says the Iglei Tal, well, the reason is because when you have a small amount of psolet mixed with a large amount of ochel, even though the people would not mind eating them together, still would be a isur of borer in a regular case. In other words, if you have, let's say, a little bit of onion in your Israeli salad, and you don't like onions, but you would have them. Most people would have them. You would have them too, but you prefer them to be out. Can you take out the onions? No, you can't. That's borer. So why is it that here you could do it and there you can't do it? It's a fundamental elephant in the room question. And says the Iglatal, a yesod, a fundamental yesod. He says the reason is because here, in addition to the fact that people would drink it without it and so on, but the fundamental yesod is that this is considered one thing. Whereas in the Israeli salad, there are different particles, different things, onions, there are cucumbers, there are tomatoes, there are other things. Here, the whole thing is seen as one. It's one entity. It's one entity.
It's not a mixture, is what he's saying.
It's one entity.
It's not a mixture.
I don't want to say it like that.
Why not?
It's because it's one entity. There are particles in it, but it is viewed as halakha as one. It's wine.
But one entity.
Right?
Is not
Well,
a mixture.
you'll see why I'm staying away from saying it like that. Right?
Push.
It's one. It's one entity. The difference would be, as you'll see, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach differentiates within this and other cases. When you have something that's considered one entity, and you would have it just like this, then you could strain it and make it more refined and fine-tuned, says the Iglatal. Now, this also answers the question, the famous question of Tilat David, that if you have psolat in wine, right, when you're interested to remove the shmarim, the fogginess, the small particles mixed with, which is psolet in the wine, why is that different than having two foods that you're separating from each other? According to the Iglatal, is geschmack, because two foods is two foods. It's two different things mixed. Here is one thing. We don't look at the mixture as a separate thing mixed. It's wine. It's wine. It's how wine is. Right? It comes with some particles. It comes sometimes with a little psolet mixed with it. But as long as it's something that people are comfortable, everyone is comfortable drinking it, and is considered one entity, it's mutar. Right? Now, you'll see how this manifests in the practical halachic examples of nowadays in the kitchen, this one element. So take a look at the bottom of 54 over here. The answer basically is based on this Iglatal, and you can read this yourself to clarify it a little bit more, but this makes a difference, for instance, in vegetable soup. Right? You have vegetable soup, and you want to separate the vegetable from the soup. Right? People eat them like that together. You just want to have the soup, or you just want to have the vegetable. Usually people want to have only the soup, not the vegetable inside. So in Sefer Shvitat Shabbat says that you could do it because they're eaten together usually, and they become like one. He uses this yesod of Iglatal. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, no, that's not an application at all. He says, over there in wine, they're mamash one. Over here, he disagrees with the Shvitat. He says, it's not a one. Because what happens when you sift the wine? What do you do with the settlements, that whatever it comes off is trash? Over here, what do you do with the vegetables? You eat them separately. So they're mamash two, not one, even though that it's vegetable soup. It's one food, but it's vegetable and the soup. And it's clearly different. You see that this is an obvious example. It's an obvious example of a different thing than wine. Because here is the vegetable, it's the soup. Now, according to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, would be the same thing if you have stuffed pepper. You don't want the rice. Because you're the Ashkenazi part of the family, not the... So you don't want the rice, right? You want to take out the rice and have the pepper alone, right? So that's two different foods. Even though that's stuffed pepper, it's one food, but it's really two foods. And you cannot really learn from one. Or you have mashed potato that is stuffed in your meat, right? Or in a knish. Right? You want the knish, not the inside. So you want to just open it and spoon out the mashed potato ala the knish. You can't do that, according to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, because that is borer. They're considered two different things that are together, and now you're separating one from the other, what you don't want from what you want, and that's a problem. Even though that most people eat them together, right? It's considered mashed potato, or potato knish. It's one food. It's stuffed cabbage or stuffed pepper, but still will be considered asur.
So the hot dog's in a blanket on Shabbat. If the hot dog is
if you only want the blanket, yeah, it would be a problem.
What about if you're saying one entity? What about a chicken and bone? Or fish?
You spoke about chicken and bone before. So go back to that. If I get chance, I'll get back to. Because the time is running. I wanted to get to the tea thing and also some of the very relevant things. So for the extra finicky people who you were asking about, take a look at the Biur Halakha that's brought over here, that the Pri Megadim says if a person never drinks wine with any mixtures, you're very sophisticated in that way, then even though that most people would not mind it at all, then you cannot strain it. Right? So that's for your question that you asked before. Now, few examples that he brings over here. I want to focus backwards on the tea bag first, because again, tea bags and tea kettles. So over here he says tea bags, you have to take them out, like the Mishnah also alludes to it, but really the psak is from Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach that even if you want to take a tea bag out of your cup, you should not take it just like that, because you're straining the tea essence and keeping up the tea leaves and straining the tea essence. So therefore, how you take it out, you can't leave it in. Some people don't want to leave it in the whole time because it becomes too dark. So this is, you take a spoon and you take them out together, and that's fine. Right? This way, none of the strained tea essence goes in. You're taking it out, that's fine. Harav Yosef says you don't even have to necessarily do that. L'chatchila, you should do that, but you don't care about that. You're not holding it up like this to drip the thing. You just quickly take it out and put it in the garbage. That's fine. But again, midat chasidut, there is something to be mindful of. As well. How about tea kettles? Right? So tea kettles are widely used in at least the Sephardi countries, even in the British that have a lot of tea. That's something that they brew and they use all the time, and this has been widely discussed and debated, as well as Sefer Beit Menucha, one of the primary Hilchot Shabbat Sfarim. He says that using a tea kettle on Shabbat, b'shum ofen nisht, you cannot use a tea kettle on Shabbat because it has a spout with a strainer. It has a built-in strainer to hold the tea leaves and let go of the tea essence, and that's exactly what's asur on Shabbat. You cannot do that. So it says Beit Menucha, and Kaf Chaim, Reb Chaim Yaakov Chaim Sofer is also machmir like the Beit Menucha. Excuse me, and that is something that many people are careful. Now, Chacham Ben Zion Abba Shaul is said to have believed that if you have a lot of tea essence inside the kettle, so on the bottom they settle down the tea leaves. After a while, they get heavy and they settle down. You have a good chunk of, good amount of just clear tea essence inside. You pour from it, that's fine. But when it gets to the end, when this mix and this strainer actually is doing a job for you there, then he's machmir. Harav is even more mekel. Harav says, well, who cares having a few tea leaves there? Nobody really cares. It becomes our sugya that if you don't care, you could strain it. So if you have a few tea leaves, well, what burns? Nothing burns. You only have it. So therefore, says Chaubadia, it's mutar to use the tea. What it says, l'chatchila, he basically ends up saying b'di'evet like that, l'chatchila like Rabbi Tzor Shaul, that make sure to have more water, wait for it to settle down, and you pour it in. That's l'chatchila, and you can have it. But again, usage of tea kettles and Shabbat will be mutar in that way. So Chabad has the tshuva in Chazon Obadia, and actually started really with a tshuva in Yechavedat Chelek Bet Siman Nun Aleph, that he allows this as well.
Even though some of the good and bad is still left over, it's not a complete filtering.
Yeah, but you are filtering, especially if it's down to the level that's not clear. Tea essence is all mixed, so then you are filtering, right? But it says rov people do not care about having a few tea leaves there. Actually, the sifters are not perfect either. You end up with tea leaves anyways. It's just a little less than you would be. And by then, when it's fully cooked, actually tea leaves settle down anyway. So most people who are tea lovers, they don't care really about having a few tea leaves inside. And also he says, you're not mitkaven livror. You're not really, your kavanah is not to separate. Therefore, that also would be fine. Chazon Ish paskins like this as well. It's not just the Harav Shlomo. It's basically, he says mutar. Now, in Shut Bait Ne'eman of Harav Mazuz, he says, if you're holding down with the teaspoon, you're holding down and pouring, that's already Isur D'Rabbanan, right? You have to be careful not to do that. Now, says Chacham Obadia, based on this, that when you have a yogurt, you open yogurt and you have some water sitting on top. Can you pour that out? Yeah, you can pour it out because people eat them together, usually. And also on top of it, they're separate. There's liquid, solid. So even if it's not really that solid, the thing still is mutar to pour it out because people use it like that and they have no problem with it. And same is with the pulp that we mentioned. If rov people eat it as it is, and again, I don't know with a lot of pulp if rov people have it like that. So something to maybe run a research. But if rov people have it like that, then you could strain it and you could clarify that as well. Something important is for people who have little babies and they make formula, or sometimes there's like hot cereals that are liquid, right? And really young babies, you cannot. You want to sift it to make sure you don't have like big pieces that have not been dissolved well, because it's going to clog the thing or it's going to be dangerous for them, and you want to sift them. So as long as the baby that age, most babies would have it, you just want it to be more refined, not to clog the thing, that's fine. But if most babies of that age would not have it with this, it goes after their age. Even though you would be comfortable, if they're not comfortable with it, then you cannot sift that on Shabbat. And maybe one last thing, and that is, when you're having tea or coffee and you see one thing floating on it, you want to just take it. Sometimes you just put a finger on it and it separates, right? Some lint or something is going on. Is that mutar? The halakha is mutar. Because according to the Taz, that you're doing some of the good with the bad, so of course some of the liquid gets in there. And we also discuss that the Marit Sahalon, you remember reviewing from before, Marit Sahalon holds that En Berera Belach. When you have in Lach, there's no Berera. We mentioned also Marach Abulafia, that he holds. Maria Abulafia rather, that he holds that when you're doing B'shat Achila Mamash, as you're eating, you're separating it. Also, there is no Isur of Brera. And also, we mentioned that in Sefer Etz Chaim, the Ma'ari Hakiz, that holds that if you have something that's floating on top of a liquid, a solid that's floating on top of a liquid, that's already considered meburar. It's already considered separated, so you want to take it off. That's also fine. So that really would be the halakha in that case. We didn't finish this seif yet, but B'ezrat Hashem will continue and we finish up a few minutes in the beginning of the next shiur. Chazaku Baruch.